Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is TVP World. You're watching World News Tonight. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. Ukraine's president says security guarantees are just days away as Donald Trump sets a 2-week deadline to revive peace talks. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. NATO warships arrive in Latvia to guard critical underwater cables. Woody Allen tapped as chief guest at Russian Film Festival. Poland's Vistula River drops to record low. Security guarantees for Ukraine will be ready in the coming days, according to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. This comes as one of NATO's top generals pledges increased support for Ukraine, but says it's still too early to discuss the deployment of foreign troops. Our correspondent in Kyiv, Oskadji, has this report.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has announced that further details regarding security guarantees will be revealed in the coming days. President Zelenskyy released a statement following his conversation with Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof, in which he said, at present, the teams of Ukraine, the United States and European partners are working on their architecture. All the developments will be ready in the coming days. Now, this comes following a meeting between US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and President Zelenskyy's Chief of Staff, Andriy Yermak. Now, this conversation also included representatives from the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy and Finland discussing security arrangements for a post-conflict scenario in Ukraine. Now, this comes following a statement made by NATO Admiral, who is chair of the NATO Military Committee, saying that discussions about troop deployments in Ukraine are premature. So a lot of ground still to be covered in these discussions between Ukraine and Europe and the United States. Now, this also comes amidst reports from the United States that Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has barred intelligence sharing from the United States between the United States and its Five Eyes partners, the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand and Australia. So while these discussions about security guarantees are heading in a positive direction as far as Kyiv is concerned, there is still a lot of ground to make up between Europe, Ukraine and the United States. Regardless, President Zelenskyy says that further details about these security guarantee discussions will be coming in the next few days. It's Oskadji reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
Amid war and resilience, Ukraine marks Flag Day. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says the blue and yellow will not fall to the occupier. Ceremonies across Kyiv honor the enduring symbol of national unity just one day before Ukraine celebrates its Independence Day. Piotr Miszczuk follows the story.
We will not give our land to the occupier, said Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy as Ukraine marks Flag Day on Saturday. A large number of Kyiv residents have joined in a series of ceremonies devoted to the crucial symbol of Ukrainian statehood.
This flag is on the Ukrainian, tanks, and on Ukraine, every, soldier has this flag, blue and yellow, but also people on the occupied territories. Do you know how they keep these flags? They put them into the glass jars and they dig them into the soil. So the flag would not be spoiled, but they keep this connection to Ukraine.
Amid the ongoing Russian strikes, Flag Day was an opportunity for Zelenskyy to reiterate that he will not yield under pressure from Russia or the US. He underlined how important the flag is for his compatriots staving off the Russian offensive.
When they see the Ukrainian colors, they understand that evil is over. And this flag is a goal and a dream for many of our people in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. They protect this flag. They protect it because they know that we will not give our land to the occupier.
On Sunday, Ukrainians living both in the country and outside the country will observe its most important celebration, Ukraine's Independence Day, a day of even greater significance as the country has been battling the Russian invasion for more than 3.5 years. For TVP World, I'm Piotr Miszczuk.
NATO is boosting its presence in the Baltic Sea with 2 more ships arriving off Latvia's coast. The move follows rising concern over suspected sabotage by Russia's shadow fleet. Moscow and Minsk are also preparing for large-scale military drills, prompting a coordinated Allied response across the region. Zuzana Jurek has more.
2 additional ships have moored off Latvia's Baltic coastline as part of NATO's Baltic Sentry policing mission. In a post on social media, the alliance underscored that this is part of the collective effort to bolster the basin's security.
What this is it's geared towards protecting critical undersea infrastructure, but also they have a broader range of operations, and it fits in with NATO's collective defense as well as deterrence and crisis response. This shows allied cohesion in addressing the threats which are very present in the Baltic Sea.
And the efforts are not unfounded. Since November 2024, the Baltic Sea has experienced an influx of suspected sabotage attempts, with ships of the so-called Russian shadow fleet of oil tankers damaging telecommunication cables and critical infrastructure, a charge which Moscow vehemently denies. This includes the cutting of the S-Link 2 cable, linking Finland and Estonia by the Eagle-S tanker, believed to be part of Russia's shadow fleet, with the ship's captain due to appear on trial on Monday in Helsinki.
We are innocent. It's just a marine accident. Someone, police, says that some spying equipment, something the shadow fleet or some illegal cargoes or something which is the absolutely bullshit and incorrect.
The strengthening of NATO's presence comes at a time when the Baltic Sea is seeing a growing show of force from both the alliance and the regimes in Moscow and Minsk. At the end of July, Russia began its naval drills, some of which are allegedly taking place in the Baltic Sea.
This is just forced posture. This is Russia trying to demonstrate that they're also, in their eyes at least, a maritime power, and that they want to be seen as a maritime power.
And seas are not the only frontier of this brinkmanship, as Russia and Belarus ready for the Zapad 2025 military exercises.
These kind of maneuvers are being held to test capabilities of the armed forces, to find gaps in the armed forces, to find shortcomings, to exercise troops, to improve their abilities, especially when we are talking about the multinational drills, also to improve the interoperability between armies of different nations.
Russia previously boasted that this year's drills would be the biggest yet, with over 200,000 troops set to participate. Much speculation loomed over just how realistic these numbers were, and on Friday, Lithuanian intelligence confirmed that only about 30,000 troops are due to partake.
Well, we do have to keep in mind that Zapad has been a mainstay exercise for the Russians to demonstrate, their propaganda and their anti-Western way of thinking, that somehow Russia and Belarus are under siege, that NATO is encroaching on them, and they must demonstrate, their solidarity.
Though the Kremlin's drills may be standard procedure, NATO's eastern flank members responded in kind.
Iron Defender, this is our response. This exercise will take place in conjunction with our allies. It will take place in all domains and coincide with the Zapad exercises that will be carried out by Russia and Belarus on the territory of the Belarusian state this September.
For TVP World, Zuzana Jurek.
Russia is stepping up its propaganda campaign in Europe with a new message: Russia is not my enemy. Kyiv says the effort aims to fracture Western unity. In a separate move seen as a soft power play, Woody Allen will appear as a guest of honor at a Moscow Film Festival. Rennie Potts brings us more.
The Kremlin is rolling out a new European propaganda initiative centered around the motto, Russia is not my enemy. This campaign, according to Ukrainian officials, is designed to cast Moscow in the role of peacemaker while fostering division within European nations. After appearing in France and Italy, the campaign has now reached Romania.
Stickers with this message are appearing in cities as part of the Kremlin's hybrid campaign aimed at creating the illusion of a peaceful partnership.
In yet another Russian propaganda win, American filmmaker Woody Allen will take part in the upcoming Moscow International Film Week. The four-time Oscar-winning director, 89, is billed as the main guest of honor at the event starting Saturday.
This year, the festival will bring together more than 80 international participants from over 20 countries. Among the special guests is Woody Allen, a 4-time Academy Award winner and a director of more than 50 films, including Midnight in Paris, Annie Hall, and Manhattan.
A recent report by the International Institute for Strategic Studies indicated that Russian propaganda and sabotage operations in Europe rose dramatically in 2024, and by June of 2025 were on pace to continue rising.
Russian sabotage operations in Europe have increased their range of targets and severity of attacks. The number of attacks almost quadrupled from 2023 to 2024.
Ever since it launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine 3 years ago, Moscow has been accused of orchestrating a hybrid war against Europe.
In modern hybrid warfare, it is typical to use such direct military action to achieve political goals, especially now when the peace process run by the Trump administration and coalition of willing is ongoing.
Several European countries, including Poland, have accused Russia of carrying out both disinformation and sabotage attacks on their territories. For TVP World, this is Randy Potts.
The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union sealed Poland's fate and lit the fuse of World War II. 86 years later, the Kremlin still honors that legacy. As Soviet symbols resurface, Russia's past is being used to shape its present ambitions. Kazimierz Wyszak brings us the story.
September 17th, 1939. Poland has been defending itself against a much stronger Nazi German army for more than 2 weeks. But then all hope is lost when the country gets stabbed in the back by its second neighbor, Soviet Russia. That's the result of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, signed in August 86 years ago.
This pact initiated a short but quite meaningful for Poland cooperation between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union.
In the subsequent years, Hitler betrays Stalin and invades the Soviet Union. History remembers Russia as one of the Allied nations which played a substantial role in defeating Nazism. But for the countries of Central Eastern Europe, the legacy of the USSR is much different.
They deprived all the countries of this region their sovereignty, that means the right to make independent political decisions, and also they exterminated the elites of those nations.
Fast forward to August 2025, the Russian delegation led by President Vladimir Putin arrives in Alaska for a historic peace summit with US President Donald Trump. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov arrives with a sweater with the letters USSR in Cyrillic on the front.
That cannot be interpreted in any other way than a big provocation, not just to his American hosts who won the Cold War, but also to all citizens of countries that are now free and that used to be enslaved by the Soviet Union.
Russia's love for its Soviet past is more than just nostalgia. It is a legacy of conquest and power, the ideals which have fueled the country's authoritarian leader Vladimir Putin for the past quarter of a century. Today, this imperialism is best visible in Ukraine. But it is not the return of the USSR that Putin seeks.
The past will not come back. Today, Russia doesn't need this, and that is not our aim.
Instead, Putin has cemented his own regime, in many aspects even more gruesome and senseless than the Soviet Union in the Cold War. The bodies of civilians in Bucha, Ukraine, are more reminiscent of the Stalinist acts of genocide. Still, the Russian president is not afraid to use the past when it suits him.
As you know, the Soviet Union does not exist anymore. The Warsaw Pact, a military coalition created in response to the formation of NATO, does not exist either. However, NATO not only still exists, it is expanding.
The twisting of the truth is one way Russia exerts control. That's why it has never taken responsibility for attacking Poland with the Nazis in 1939.
One is the non-acknowledgement. The second, and even more important, sad fact about this anniversary is that we seem to be back to great power politics over the heads and behind the backs of the smaller nations in between the great powers.
For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
Poland remains one of America's closest allies, but a recent poll shows more Poles are skeptical of President Donald Trump's approach to European security and the war in Ukraine. The numbers mark a shift from his previous term when Trump enjoyed broader support in the country. Michael van Blomestein reports.
Poland loves America. But that doesn't mean Poles are necessarily enthusiastic about its current president, Donald Trump. According to a survey published on Onet.pl, half of Poles don't trust the president on international security, while only 29% say they do. The numbers are almost identical to an earlier poll from the same website, which shows Polish people are generally skeptical about Trump's ability to end the war in Ukraine. Such sentiments are a far cry from what the Polish public thought of Trump during the US president's first term. Toward the end of his term, polling showed over half of the public had a favorable view of him.
Poles value the U.S. being involved in their security and their defense. And in the first Trump term, there was a lot of at least rhetoric about that. But Trump came into office this time around in the fourth year of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. And rather than taking a hard line against that invasion, he's been chaotic, unpredictable, and really in it for himself.
But that doesn't mean Polish sentiments on the US as an ally are cooling. Every Polish government since the fall of communism has pursued a policy of involving the US in Europe's defense architecture. Poland has long been the US's most enthusiastic ally in Europe, no matter who occupies the White House or who governs in Poland. It was one of the few European countries that aided the US with troops during the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And despite their skepticism towards Trump, Polish voters elected Karol Nawrocki as president, the candidate that fully embraced Donald Trump and went out of his way to be seen with the president. It is, however, unclear whether this alignment with Trump directly contributed to his victory.
He might have used a Trumpist style, but Polish people didn't necessarily vote for that style. They didn't necessarily vote for that rhetoric.
Whether Trump is popular in Poland or not will have no direct consequences for the US president. But it does say something about how his handling of European security is perceived by the US's staunchest European ally. For TVP World, Michiel van Blommestein.
Poland's largest river, Vistula, has dropped to its lowest level on record, with water being as low as 10 centimeters at Warsaw's main measuring point. The dramatic drop is raising concerns about environmental stability, though local residents remain divided. Hubert Kiesel reports.
The water in Warsaw's Vistula River has dropped to alarming levels amid a continuing hydrological drought. Around 10 centimeters of water is a surprising view for many.
For now, I suppose this is the lowest level I have ever seen. We often try to come to this place. I remember when the Vistula was a bit higher and it looked a bit different.
For some, it is an alarming sign that the local ecosystem is not functioning properly.
There is simply a catastrophe here. It's visible. Wooden piles are sticking out of the Vistula.
While others say that it does not affect them directly.
I've seen the Vistula with less water. As long as boats can still sail over it, it's not so bad.
An expert from Poland's Institute of Meteorology says that the drought has been ongoing in Poland for a long time. Even if there are periods with more rainfall, the volume of water does not suffice to reach the appropriate levels back.
The process started in the winter when we had a dry, warm winter with little to no snow cover. We had experienced water deficits before spring, and then a dry spring appeared. This did not improve the hydrological situation, and the deficits have persisted for a long time. Even quite heavy rainfall does not improve the situation for long. A drought is a long-term process, both when it begins and when it ends. Firstly, there are many causes, ranging from meteorological and climatic to human-created.
Since little rainfall is expected in the coming days and weeks, low water levels in the Vistula River will likely continue.
The Trump administration is once again positioning itself as a mediator in the war between Russia and Ukraine. A trilateral summit has been floated, security guarantees debated, and talks with Putin and Zelenskyy remains uncertain. What's really happening behind the scenes? Well, joining us today on TVP World is Michael McKay, former lecturer at the University of Kyiv Academy and a seasoned analyst of international conflict dynamics. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Hello.
So President Trump has given a 2-week deadline for progress or face massive sanctions or tariffs if no meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy has materialized. How credible do you find this ultimatum?
Not at all. Trump has given numerous deadlines such as this. This is the third one in which he's actually said 2 weeks that I can recall. Others have been vague, and there was a 50-day one. So it is not credible at all. And don't forget that he gave this deadline not directly in response to this idea that the two leaders would sit down, but when he was asked a question about the Russians bombing an American factory. So it's clearly a diversion, and this threat, if it is that, it is not credible at all.
Meanwhile, Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov says that no summit will be held until a clear agenda is agreed upon. Of course, a lot of people are looking at it as a delaying tactic, but at the same time, it does really seem like two sides can't really reach a conclusion.
No, it's Russia that cannot reach a conclusion because it cannot possibly set any terms for a meeting, and therefore it sets impossible terms. So, for example, this preconditions for a meeting are in fact that Ukraine agree to give up Crimea, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, that they agree never to join NATO, that they demilitarize, that they never bring up the issue of reparations. That's actually Russia's precondition for having a meeting where these things would actually be decided. So it's not a question of both sides. That's a false narrative completely. Don't forget, Ukraine has agreed to an unconditional ceasefire, which is the first condition for talks. Russia has refused an unconditional ceasefire, has escalated its attacks on defenders and civilians, and then sets impossible conditions every time the possibility of a meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy comes up. In fact, Putin is afraid of such a meeting and will do anything to avoid it.
Right, so several questions to unpack here. First of all, about bringing up these impossible terms to kind of indefinitely postpone the meeting. You mentioned that Putin seems to be afraid of having such meeting. Can you help us unpack why that would be?
He's afraid because his base of power in Russia is fragile. If he were to meet with Zelenskyy, it would be as an equal. And he has never seen that. Remember, he sees Ukraine as a colonial dependency of Russia. He said many times that Zelensky's presidency is illegitimate. So he's boxed himself in a corner that he could not possibly meet Zelenskyy as an equal. In fact, it would be contrasted with his meeting with Trump, where he got himself to be declared as an equal, and that was a triumph. So there's numerous reasons why he could never meet with Zelenskyy.
All right, so we're essentially in a Gordian knot here. Like I mentioned, Russia setting impossible terms to not even meet, with the Trump administration pushing very hard for this meeting to actually take place, as well as a European leader still scrambling for a security guarantee for Ukraine. My question would be, what's next? If this deadline is met and, well, nothing materializes, how do you think America will respond?
Well, how I think America will respond is give another meaningless deadline and procrastinate and do anything to avoid imposing serious sanctions on Russia or providing serious support to Ukrainian defenders. So that's what I think is likely to happen. What should happen is that when the United States fails in its responsibilities in 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks, as they will, that Europe step up and realize that the way to cut this Gordian knot is to take charge of European security in Europe. And that means committing to Ukraine's victory, committing to the defeat of the Russian invaders, sheltering the sky, imposing serious sanctions to the level of a total embargo. The steps are very clear about how we do cut this Gordian knot and get on the path to peace, which is only through Ukraine's victory.
All right, so like I said, Europe has to step up in order for this to be over. However, we are seeing also a lot of different narratives coming from different leaders. Foreign Minister from Germany have just recently said in the podcast that while they're having a stationed troop in Latvia makes it so that they cannot bring any troops to Ukraine, or a NATO general saying that foreign troops on the ground is also not being considered, or it's too early to consider that. Do you think that the disunity between all these different narratives is going to be a hindrance to actually reaching anything substantive?
Yes, it will. It will be a hindrance. This lack of unity. The European Union, for example, has not overcome the unanimity rule, so they cannot get past the stalling tactics of Hungary and to some extent Slovakia. And they can't shift out of this pre-2014 narrative. For example, saying, oh, will there be peacekeepers or not peacekeepers, makes no sense when there is no peace to keep when the war has not been won. So if a European country comes to its senses, and there are some in Eastern Europe in particular, and say the narrative should be about defeating the invasion, and we can't talk about restoring Ukraine and peacekeeping troops until the invaders have been defeated, and therefore instead of peacekeeping forces, people should be talking about expeditionary forces. But the problem is this built-in institutional cowardice that democratic politics has evolved over the past, well, really 70 years since the end of the Second World War, has been a tremendous impediment to European unity and a tremendous benefit to the Russian invaders.
And speaking of the Second World War, today actually marks the anniversary of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which is a deal struck over the heads of smaller nations with devastating consequences for Eastern Europe. As we now see renewed talks between US, Russia, European leaders, do you think we are at the risk of repeating a history in a different form without the input of Ukraine?
Absolutely. We are forgetting the lessons of history, and we are repeating the mistakes of the past. I wrote today about how, in acknowledgement at this anniversary of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, that there is a pact between Russia and North Korea. North Korean troops are in combat alongside Russian troops invading Europe. And yet no European leader is confronting that. Instead, going back and talking about the risk of Europe providing serious support, including military support, to Ukrainian defenders. So that we have this absurd situation of an axis at war against Europe and an alliance which is afraid to defend, and the only defender is Ukraine, which is outside the NATO alliance and outside the European Union.
All right, thank you so much for your input and insight. Now, the 2-week deadline is counting down, and we'll have to see how it develops. In the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for tuning into this edition of World News Tonight. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.